Hi guys, Tucker here with a new video. And this video is the first class tuning of Season 3, which is going to be live next week, the 15th of November. And there are chances there where we will have some PvP tuning Monday, maybe. I think it will not be, but I think the first week of the season will be very wild. And I think that will bring for new changes, but for now we have some class tuning for PvP and PvE, so it's important for both. So we are going to talk about both things that are going to be changed and the triple down effect for PvP. So let's talk about really quickly. We have Death Knight and Holy Decay that are going to get buffed in 1 week time. I don't know if it's warranted for PvP. I think for PvE it might be, because then they nerfed how PI works for the Unholy Decay and such, but pretty much Death Coil damage increased by 10%, which is big. It is a spender, does a lot of damage, and already does a lot of damage in PvP. You have crazy modifiers for PvP. I think for PvE it's a bit different, I guess, but for PvP it is really hard hitting. We have Score Strike Clawing Shadows, which basically also gets a 10% buff, and that is also a spender, and it is really strong. We have Festering Wounds, which is the second part of the Score Strike Clawing Shadows, but having the buff on the first spell press of Score Strike and Clawing Shadows will be quite impressive. I think this is going to be very noticeable in PvP. In PvE it might be different, but in PvP it is. Gold damage increased by 8%. I think that is warranted because pets are not doing that much damage these days right now. I think most people in PvP are not spec'd into pet spec pretty much, because it's also unreliable, has longer CDs, and in general doing damage by themselves are going to be more impressive than just relying on pets. But that is increased. We have Virulent Plague damage increased by 20%, which is the dot. Is it going to be noticeable? I don't know. I feel like the dot portion of Unholy Decay does less damage than, let's say, if the fever from Frost Decay. I think Frost Decay already critted once on a dot for 30k, which doesn't really happen for me whenever I'm playing Unholy Decay with Virulent Plague, even whenever I'm like going for a build which is going around dot damage. But yeah, this is going to be, I think, not really noticeable. Apocalypse gold damage increased by 5%. That's going to be quite nice whenever you're going to do an apocalypse and you will have multiple ghouls spawning. That will do more damage. It will be a bit noticeable, but again, pet damage, that's not the biggest part of Unholy Decay currently, at least. Demon Hunter Vengeance, Emerald Drizzle tier set bonus sigil of flame damage granted reduced by 20%, and illuminated sigils now increases parry chances against affected targets by 15% instead of 20%. So that's a nerf for PvE. Probably PvP, I don't know how good Vengeance Demon Hunter is, so I cannot really pronounce any opinion about it. Golden Druid got a buff on their energy regeneration of cat form, but also the regen on Mangle for generation, I would say. I don't know if it's a really big change, but it is a change. Balance Druid, it's a cat form energy regeneration increased by 50%. Yeah, I don't think it's very noticeable in PvP or in PvE. I just think it's a baseline change for the whole class. Rip damage increased by 140% in PvE. That's quite interesting. For PvP it is not live, but Rake damage increased by 60%. That is going to be quite noticeable for 2v2 resto druids. And Shred damage increased by 140%, which is going to be quite good whenever you're going to play with Heart of the Wild PvP talent. You're going to do some good damage with Shred, I think. But I'll have to test it. I think there is opportunities for you to do a lot of damage. Ferocious Bite got buffed by 200%, but does not apply in PvP combat. I think that is logical because it already hits for a lot. If you can actually do a Ferocious Bite with Heart of the Wild, you can actually do a lot of damage. But again, in PvE it's quite different. Cat form energy regeneration increased by 50%. That's going to be very noticeable for 2v2. To get a lot of combo points, you kind of need the energy regen, so that's going to be quite nice. Augmentation, they got nerfed, and that's good. I don't think it's very much going to change about augmentation evokers in PvP, but At least it gets nerfed. Ibn Might grants 6.5% of the evoker's primary stat. I think it's halved in PvP, but I'm not sure. But it's 6.5% right now. Close as Clutch Mage increases the effectiveness of Ibn Might and Breath of Aeons by 10% instead of 20%. I think that is a talent, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, that got nerfed. The amount of versatility granted by Shifting Sands has been reduced by 50%. It's an overall big nerf. I think in PvP it could be noticeable, but I'm not really sure about that. Mage, Frost Mage got a buff on their Glacial Spike on the 2 set, but again in PvP it's only 8%, it's not 16%. And you have an AoE explosion that is getting nerfed by 5% in PvE, and my guess it's going to be also halved in PvP. So again, it depends if you want to play 2 or 4 sets for Frosty Mage. I didn't really theory craft for that for PvP, but again, Glacial Spike doing more damage is always welcome, I think, for PvP. Brewmaster, we have the 4 sets getting buffed as a whole for Breath of Fires. Against tank, I do not know much about tanks in PvE, and in PvP, I think Brewmaster is in a spot where you can one-shot, but it has to occur with a lot of luck. Anyways, Windwalker, Blackout reinforcement granted by melee abilities now occurs 66% more often and increases Blackout kick damage by 200% instead of 150%. So I think it's going to be Blackout kick hit for a lot, but I don't know if it's going to be like crazy amounts. I don't think it's like a Rising Sun kick amount, but I'll have to test it maybe. But again, I think it's better to see it next week. Whenever someone has a tier set, for example, or probably in 2 weeks time or 3 weeks time, you will have 2 sets, and I'll wonder if it's going to be better or not for Windwalker. I think current set is better than the next one for Windwalker, that for sure. Retribution Paladin, all ability damage increased by 3%. That's a nice buff for PvP and PvE. They love their 3%. Discipline Priest got the nerf on their damage on Inescapable Torment. Now in PvP you don't really play that often with this talent. It's really out of the way. Like I would say you have to lose a lot of healing capacities to actually go for that. So I think it's quite fine. I think it's more of a PvE thing. And Divine Aegis absorption reduced to 5% of healing done was 10%. That just makes it like not worth to take anymore in PvP. Just take something else, pretty much. Rogue, Assassination Rogue got their tooltip changed for actual output, but also set single target damage increased by 4%, so it's going to be doing a lot of damage. And on PTR it did a lot of damage, so I wonder how they're going to do that for PvP. Destruction Warlock got a buff on their Flame Rift damage increased by 50%, which is a good thing, which means the current 4 set does the same damage as the buffed one, I would say, because it's minus 50%, like divided by 2, I would say, for PvP. So now you get buff of 50%, so it will be around the same amount of damage that you would get without the nerf before the buff. Anyways, complicated, it just does more damage for PvP. Unstable Tear damage increased by 5%, Shadowy Tear damage increased by 5%, and Chaos Tear damage increased by 30%. This is actually going to be very strong in PvP, especially the Chaos one. It will do a lot of damage, and if you're lucky, you get a Flame Rift and a Chaos Tear, and it does like insane damage. I think the Unstable one and the Shadowy one doesn't really do that much like burst damage. It's a lot of consistent damage, but in PvP I think it's quite nice. Still, you're playing with this talent anyway, so it's a good buff. We have a buff to the Doom Brand single target damage increased by 50%, and Doom Fiend single target damage increased by 40%. Aberris got nerfed. Doesn't matter anyways, because you're not really playing with that set anyways. But that's a buff. But again, it's really hard to know if demonology is going to be good or not. It does feel bad to play demonology. I do feel like a lot of damage is like very hidden. You can do a lot of damage, but you will not feel like it. But whenever you're seeing on the details, like on your meters, you will see that you're top DPS. But it's really weird how they shifted the damage and how they feel. I don't think it's a very fun spec to play. And I think they need a rework to actually make it better overall. But this is like the class tuning for next week. It's very mild. Again, it's mild. It's really about the tier sets. more or less, and a few buffs here and there. I think unholy DK will be insane next week. If they keep on getting buffed, I think their damage is going to be out of control. I've already seen like crazy one-shots from unholy DKs these days anyways, but I think they need, like in PvP at least, they need survivability above damage. I think damage is never going to be an issue for unholy DK. I really think like they need survivability, and the same for Frost DK, to be honest. But overall, I am happy about augmentation getting nerfed. I'm very sorry for you guys that are actually like playing augmentation evoker, but it's obnoxious to play against. It's obnoxious to play against in RBGs. It's like in SOLOQ RBGs, it's obnoxious. In 2v2, it's obnoxious. In 3v3, it's obnoxious. In Soul Shuffle, it is obnoxious. So overall, I'm happy that they actually nerf it. But I think the best way to go for augmentation evoker is to actually get a rework again. I think they completely missed the evoker spec, except for preservation evoker. I think augmentation and devastation evokers, they're completely missed, and they just need a rework. I think a lot of specs will get a rework for next expansion, but right now we'll just have to walk on eggs and try to have the best amount of gameplay out of the last seasons of Dragonflight, so this one and the next one. Anyways, thank you for watching, have a great day, and be sure to subscribe to the channel if you want PvP content. We're talking about everything: SOLOQ RPG, Soul Shuffle, 2v2, 3v3, everything, so be sure to stay tuned. Bye.